Therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. This has got to be one of the most poetically beautiful verses in all of Scripture, at least in my opinion. And King Theoden from Lord of the Rings actually, I think, understands this verse a little more than we might think at first glance, though it does take him a little bit of time to fully get there. When we first see King Theoden, he is a man who is broken. Grima Wormtongue has been whispering in Theoden's ear for years, reminding him he is a failed king, that he is old and weak. And over time, Theoden begins to believe the lies. Wormtongue is a literal devil on Theoden's shoulder, spoon-feeding him lies until finally Theoden is willing to eat the worms himself. You see, unlike the movies, the books do not describe a magical spell that is cast over Theoden, which clouds his judgment or sends him into despair. On the contrary, in the book, we actually see a much more grounded and human fall for Theoden. Theoden simply succumbs to his own fears of becoming a failure in his lineage, but those thoughts are reinforced by an outside source, Wormtongue. It is not until Gandalf comes and speaks truth into Theoden's life that the king is finally able to begin seeing more clearly. When Theoden finally rejects the words of Grima, he begins to step back into his true identity and more firmly understand his place in this world. You see, all Grima had to do was expose the fear that Theoden already had, the fear of not living up to those who came before him. And this is in fact a very deep and spiritual idea that we get from Hebrews chapter 12, which we read at the beginning of this video. That verse is the culmination of a long list of biblical heroes, from Moses, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, even Rahab, and many others. And when we read this list of biblical heroes, we can often begin to feel small and insignificant, just like Theoden in the shadow of his own ancestors. But let me ask you something. Are we missing the point here? Are we really supposed to be hyperfixating on our ancestors and pleasing them and trying to achieve greatness like they did? Well, let's take a deeper look. On a strictly human level, it is only natural for us to look at those who came before us, to admire their strengths and victories, and to learn from their mistakes. Even in the book of Proverbs it states, "Children's children are the crown of old men, and the glory of children is their father." The Bible itself describes a special relationship between fathers and their children and their forefathers. And so it is not unreasonable for us to want to look to the forerunners of the faith, and to try and follow in their footsteps. Even Paul tells us to follow his direction. Imitate me, just as I imitate Christ. Paul is not setting himself up here as an idol to be worshipped, nor is he even saying that he's perfect. On the contrary, from Scripture, we see many of Paul's flaws throughout his life, with Paul even calling himself the chief of sinners. But what Paul is saying is that he has run the race of faith, and we are to follow in the footsteps of the work that God has done through him. Paul is passing the baton to those who came after, not saying he is superior. And yet, despite that fact, it is still all too easy to fall into this trap of feeling insignificant compared to those who came before us. And King Theoden suffered the same pressure to do right by his ancestors. But as his story progresses, we actually begin to see a change in Theoden, as he slowly understands the reason why Rohan, or men in general, remember their ancestors and their actions. But a major turning point occurs for King Theoden in the Return of the King, specifically in Chapter 3, The Muster of Rohan. Here we witness a conversation between Eomer and Theoden. "But if you would take my counsel," said Eomer in a low voice, "you would then return hither until the war is over, lost or won." Theoden smiled. "Nay, my son, for so I will call you. Speak not the soft words of Wormtongue in my old ears." He drew himself up and looked back at the long line of his men fading into the dusk behind. Long years in the space of days it seems since I rode west, but never will I lean on a staff again. If the war is lost, what good will be my hiding in the hills? And if it is won, what grief will it be, even if I fall, spending my last strength? In these lines we see how Theoden is finally breaking free from the lies of Wormtongue, the lies that he is too old or has failed his fathers. He does not heed the wicked whisper to go back to his home and hide in the hills or in the halls of Edoras. No, Theoden now understands a much deeper truth, that there is a duty laid before him that he must rise to meet, and just like his ancestors, there is a task that was given to him that he must accomplish. He sees there is no use hiding in the hills, but is also keenly aware that there is nothing lost in spending the last of his strength to charge into the darkness as the light of the world, or the light the Gondor needed. And as Theoden makes his final ride toward Minas Tirith, he is awarded one final chance, a chance to turn back, abandon the quest, and go home. After all, where was Gondor when the West Fold fell? For but a moment the same questions run through Merry's mind. But the king sat upon Snowmane, motionless, gazing upon the agony of Minas Tirith, as if stricken suddenly by anguish or by dread. He seemed to shrink down, cowed by age. Merry himself felt as if a great weight of horror and doubt had settled on him. His heart beat slowly. Time seemed poised in uncertainty. They were too late. Too late was worse than never. Perhaps Theoden would quail, bow his old head, churn, slink away to hide in the hills. This is the moment. This is the moment where all of Theoden's ancestors are watching, to see if he will turn and run or stand and fight. And as this question hangs uncomfortably in the air, Merry notices a change. At that sound the bent shape of the king springs suddenly erect. Tall and proud he seemed again, and rising in his stirrups he cried in a loud voice, more clear than any there had ever heard a mortal man achieve before. Arise, arise, riders of Theoden! Fell deeds awake, fire and slaughter, spear shall be shaken, shield be splintered, a sword day, a red day, ere the sun rises. Ride now, ride now, ride to Gondor. Ride to Gondor. Theoden has chosen to ride. In the films, Theoden cries death as he charges forward. In the books, this line is later spoken by Éomer, but the heart behind the word is the same in either case. Theoden is not riding to Minas Tirith to achieve victory. He is riding because it is the right thing to do, regardless of the outcome. And so the Battle of Pelennor Fields rages on. The horse and rider have come to save the White City, with the King of Rohan at the helm. Now what is interesting about this moment is that at the same time, Denethor is making entirely different decisions. Denethor looks at the dark sky and host of Mordor before him, and he concludes that all hope is lost. There is no hope of victory. He takes his own life at the realization that his line has ended. He fears because he has no control over the outcome. And yet, when Theoden looks at the exact same dark sky and the same army of Mordor, he concludes there is no hope of victory as well. But unlike Denethor, Theoden says, "Let us ride anyway." One man cowers at the end, more concerned about his personal lineage than the fate of his people or the world, while the other man acknowledges those who came before him and rides to meet them in glory. But this battle will ultimately be the end of Theoden. He fights valiantly on the fields of Pelennor, but is vanquished by his enemies. Though even here there is a lesson to be learned. In King Theoden's last moments he finally understands his place in his lineage when he says the following. "Farewell, Master Habitla," he said. "My body is broken. I go to my fathers. And even in their mighty company I shall now not be ashamed." But how can Theoden now say this confidently? He was felled on the field of war, and he does not yet know the outcome of the battle. He is simply an old king who ran into a battle too great for him, and was defeated at the hands of his enemies. But you see, Theoden can say this, because he understands the point that I've been alluding to this whole time. Theoden's worth is not measured by whether or not he won the battle. He is measured by his faith. "For I am already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Finally, there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day, and not to me only, but also to all who have loved his appearing. Theoden has fought the good fight, he has run the race, and he has kept the faith. And because of this, he can now go in peace to his forefathers. Because the focus was never meant to be on the forefathers, but rather on who the forefathers served. Think back to Hebrews chapter 12 at the beginning of this video, that Jesus is the author and finisher of our faith. All that we have to do is to trust in him, have faith in him, and go where he leads us. Theoden is not now in the halls of his forefathers because of anything that he has done, as some might wrongly conclude. He is there because he finally understands that all that ever mattered is that he was faithful to the light, just like his forefathers were before him. Therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Thank you so much for watching. Please take care. God bless.